Welcome, sock puppets, sociopaths, some new guys I saw in the comments who didn't know what TLD stands for, and you failed to enlighten them. Thank you for helping us grow our fan base, our loyal friends. Welcome to episode 1 of season 3 of Stream of Consciousness. I've decided that since we did those 3 special episodes, or 2 special episodes, it was a good enough time to start a new season. Not that it means anything. I just like the naming convention. Look, it's been a pretty relaxed week in politics this week, thankfully. We've seen the budget fallout. Not much. We don't really care about it that much. The Liberals have decided it's all about death taxes. I'm looking forward to getting into that with Ross tonight. In case you weren't aware, tonight's guest is Ross Cameron, former Liberal member of the House of Representatives, who's gone on to much bigger and better things. He's currently the president of Australian Libertarians. And yeah, we're going to be talking about some forbidden law from the dark days of the Liberals. We're going to be talking about, what's going on with the rise of One Nation. We're going to be talking a bit about some international politics. Should be fun. Look, what I wanted to open the show with tonight was to talk about what I think is kind of the biggest news story of the week. News over the last few days that Thomas Sewell and the White Australia Party, the nascent White Australia Party, have filed had their application accepted to the High Court, and that's going to commence very shortly. In fact, I think they have a directions hearing tomorrow. It's being reported on in a pretty benign way, even by some of the biggest critics of Australian nationalism, because I think on some level, everyone with half a brain in this country realizes how important this case is going to be. And it's not important in an ideological sense at all. It wouldn't matter if it was National Socialists or Communists or even weirder ideologies like mine. Like, it wouldn't matter if I was trying to start the Neo-Reaction Party and wipe out 30% of the population. What matters is they want a party. And the Commonwealth government is seeking to stop them from doing that. There's already been a lot of commentary in the last few days that indicate Tony Burke's announcement banning them was most likely done because he was aware that their paperwork was ready to be filed to the Electoral Commission. In my mind, the right to political communication in our country is the single most important right that we have. Critics of the Australian Constitution and the way it's drafted, often cite the fact that there aren't that many rights conferred upon Australians. That's not strictly true. There's 5 rights conferred absolutely by the Constitution: right, freedom of religion, the right to vote, trial by jury, discharge of property, etc. Right? There are dozens, possibly even hundreds of rights conferred through statute at every level of state and federal government. There are some rights that have been conferred on Australians via referendum, like, for example, the right of Indigenous people to vote and to be not treated as wildlife was conferred through a referendum. But there is only one right in Australia that has been affirmed at every single level, and that's the so-called implied right to political communication. And that's what's under threat right now. This right is so important that the High Court have found it even stands in occasions where governments wish to restrict the ability of who can and can't donate to political campaigns. If you don't have a right to communicate politically, you don't have a right to vote anyway, because what does it matter? If you don't have a right to campaign and to decide who goes to Parliament, none of the other rights matter. So this is the most important right that we have. And it's been there now since assumed in 1901, but most people thought it was confirmed in 1951, when the referendum to attempt banning the Australian Communist Party failed. Narrowly, it was close, but it failed. And I found out something fascinating today because I was watching the struggle session with sort of Ross's friends on Sky News, Shari Markson, and I think she had on, I can't remember the MP's name, the nebbish-looking one, where they were saying how awful it is and how Anthony Albanese has to stop this from happening. And they, of course, invoke Australia's war dead. And they say, well, what would the Anzacs who fought the Nazis have thought about an attempt, a Nazi party starting here? Putting aside the fact that the Nazi party ran in 2 elections in the 1970s, scoring just, I think, 1.4 and 1.6% across 3 years. I found a fascinating thing, which was that in 1951, when that referendum went ahead, according to the Electoral Commission, there may have been somewhere around 18,000 Australians deployed. There were 9,000 ballots in the referendum sent to Korea, where we were fighting communists at the time. I mean, putting aside every other war, every brushfire war and that Cold War, those Cold War decades, I mean, none was more strictly a battle against communism than Korea. And of those 9,000 soldiers, a little over a third actually voted against banning the Communist Party. So I think that kind of answers the question that, not everyone would have wanted that banned. And, I think this is the stuff we need to be thinking about a lot this year. I feel like this is going to be the big issue that galvanizes people politically beyond left and right, beyond nationalists and socialists, beyond all the old kind of boundaries. I think this is going to be the thing that you'll start to see people you don't always agree with agreeing with us on this one. And I think you're also going to be really disappointed in some people supposedly from our own side who, may not have the most, freedom-loving views on this stuff. I was there in New South Wales in the early 2010s when we tried to ban the unions from campaigning, from unions contributing third-party funds, which was the High Court case that ended up really deciding that there is, in fact, an implied right to political communication. And it was absolutely good and proper. And afterwards, everyone just went along with it and agreed with it. Look, there are some problems with it that probably do need to be tidied up in statute. I mean, in New South Wales, they do have the limitation on who can donate, right? You can't be a property developer and donate, which has always been kind of stupid. But property developers could still run a campaign. They could still start the property development party if they wanted. So in that respect, their freedom isn't impinged. So let me know what you think in the chat, guys, to the extent to which the Helly Hansen wearing friends, or not all friends, should be stopped from forming their party. I don't think many of you are going to think they should. We've now got, I just walked away, but we do have Ross backstage, and I'm about to let him on. We'll go through some of the chat because while he's away. Flynn says he's cool with ban on property developer bans. Yeah, probably, dude. They were having a really bad time of it in New South Wales back then. Restore New South Wales, it's hilarious if this is the hill that Albo dies on by calling a referendum on banning Nazis. Well, exactly, dude. I mean, this is where it ends up, right? Because if the High Court comes back and says, no, White Australia can start their party, well, that's his only option left. So, guys, we've now got Ross. Oh, he's on the phone, actually, so we might just wait a second. Ross is now backstage. I'm going to let him on. We're going to kick off a little early since he's here. Welcome to Stream of Consciousness, Ross Cameron.
Mate, it's great to be here.
Thank you, mate. Thank you for joining us. So we'll get straight into it, man. You're a former Liberal MP. You were a member of the Liberal Party, I think, until, 2018? Yep. What are your feelings on where it's ended up? As you might have seen in the chat, we have a catchphrase here: "Total Liberal death." This is one of the reasons why this stream was started, was to try and bring the hammer down on what we saw as the myriad failures of the Liberals to actually represent our interests. But where's your head on it now?
Yeah, well, one is always kind of challenged to try and net out your personal experiences, blood feuds, disappointments, and triumphs. Look, I think that up until last week, I was operating on the assumption that the Liberal Party was in effect dead, buried, and cremated. And could not, like Lazarus, come from the dead. I think that this budget is sufficiently bad. I mean, it has just landed like an unflushable turd, like the proverbial pork pie at the bar mitzvah. And we don't have to. I'm always, as a libertarian / conservative, I always go to the numbers. If I have data available, I don't regard myself as governed by the data in a completely authoritarian sense, but I regard it as in my interest to understand the data. And I note we've seen a basically 10-point turnaround, such that Angus Taylor, who looked like initially he simply was not going to be able to turn the Titanic away from the iceberg, has bounced back in a 10-point swing on one poll to be the preferred Prime Minister as against Anthony Albanese in the week or so since the budget. So I think if I follow the data, as I must, indeed Socrates said one must follow the facts in an argument like the ship blown on the ocean, wherever the facts may take you, then I have to say Angus Taylor is still has a beating pulse.
I think you might be right. Yeah. What do you think's what do you think's driving that though? What do you think specifically in the budget? I mean, I've seen them doing the death tax thing in the last 24 hours. I really don't think the death tax is probably the right policy. But what in particular in the budget do you think's driving that?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of elements, and I think it's always good before you dive into the sort of entrails to step back and try and look at the kind of organism in the whole. And I think a part of it, the honesty question, the deception question, which hangs over the budget like a bad smell, arises from the fact that both Anthony Albanese and now Treasurer Jim Chalmers were asked on multiple occasions, indeed, according to Anthony Albanese, on 50 separate occasions, did the government have any plans to alter arrangements relating to discretionary trusts and capital gains tax? And on over 50 separate occasions, the government, the Albanese and Chalmers emphatically, clearly, unequivocally denied any intention to change those measures. And, we may ask, then here we are on the night of the budget with a direct assault, the centerpiece of the whole document, the whole strategy, is a full frontal assault on the rates of capital gains tax and the tax treatment of discretionary and testamentary trusts. And I think we can, we can sometimes risk just taking a predictable reactionary, Albo is a liar, which he obviously is. But there's a bigger question we may ask: why does it produce this reaction? And I think a part of it is because when you lie about something fundamental, and when you just go 180 degrees in the opposite direction to what you promised you would do while campaigning for the job, it then places this question over any other statement you make on any subject at all. And a rational journalist attending an Anthony Albanese press conference on the findings of the latest meeting of the Pacific Forum, which he attended in Tuvalu, the first question should be, well, Prime Minister, did you actually attend that forum? Are you making a true statement, or is this thinking crock of shit that you're just feeding us for some other purpose? And so you get this devaluation in the credibility of the government on every other subject. And, the reason why I tend to be tough on this criteria in part is because I was a part of the Howard government, which had significant defects, which we might get to. But one of them was not sneaking up on the Australian people with a massive architectural change to the tax system. When the government decided in its, I think it was its second term, that it would introduce a goods and services tax, despite having promised not to, John Howard, Peter Costello, and the cabinet and the entire backbench said, well, we must take this to an election and seek and secure a fresh mandate. Having promised not to do this while campaigning for office, we must invite the Australian people to express a view. And it
almost won, right? I mean, that was the election where Beazley actually won on primary from recollection in '98. I mean, they lost a lot of seats. It was line ball. It was one of the first ones where they won 2PP, but not the primary. So it was extremely close. But
and so,
at least they were willing to do it.
And so I say so now, and we actually find this principle in operation, a kind of breaking of bones, of breaking of Labor bones, which we have felt over the last week. We saw at the absolute core of the government's legitimacy, and I think Labor has been startled by the strength of the reaction to this deception. And we saw the same principle in operation by contradistinction to Howard's approach when Julia Gillard, went to an election emphatically stating in the most memorable phrase, there will be no carbon tax under a government I lead. And Australians went into the polling booth with that phrase echoing in their mind and cast their ballots. And Julia Gillard snuck over the line with the help of two formerly Conservative independents, Rob Oakeshott and Tony Windsor. And the point is, when she then found herself in a situation where she could only form a government if she did a deal with the Greens, she could only do a deal with the Greens if she agreed to introduce a carbon tax. The Australian people went from voting for a leader committed to no carbon tax to a week after her election announcing a new carbon tax. And in that moment, in my opinion, Julie Gillard tore up 50% of her political capital, and in truth, her premiership never recovered. But we ought to recognise exactly the same principle operated in the administration of Tony Abbott that succeeded her. When Tony Abbott, on the eve of the election, in a situation where he was actually in a very strong position and did not need to put sort of further icing on the cake, he went out and gave an interview, I'm pretty sure, to the ABC, and he said, if I'm elected, there will be no cuts to the ABC, no cuts to SBS, no cuts to welfare, no cuts to something else. And then in his very first budget, he came out with cuts to the ABC, cuts to the SBS, cuts to welfare, cuts to everything else. And in my opinion, there was that same sense of the sound of breaking bones, where the Australian people, each time they go to election, they're sort of hoping and a praying that maybe this government will be different. Maybe this government will actually do what it says it's going to do. And then when we validate their worst fears, there's a kind of, a breaking moment that takes place. And that's what has happened to this Labor government over the last week.
I feel like a big part of it for them is, they probably, believe their own spin a bit too much, and particularly probably believe the spin of people like Cos Samaras online, who, boost up their tires about the changing demography and how it's a whole new world and you have to listen to Gen Z. But the old electorate is still there. The old demographic is still there. There's still, people who have discretionary trusts, or people who are about to create them in their estates. There's still people who are, living off their superannuation. It feels like they just misread the room, and importantly, they misread the mainstream media, who they just got so used to being their friends. They forgot who the mainstream media's audience is, and they're not going to bite the hand that feeds them either. I mean, the people who are going to care about this policy aren't watching YouTube and listening to podcasts. The people who care about this backflip are watching Channel 7, Channel 9, ABC. And so I think that's really what's caught them off guard, is they, I think, assumed that, oh, we get all this support from Gen Z, millennials. We'll obviously keep getting that through the mainstream media, but that's not the audience anymore. So yeah, you're right. It is a breaking of the bones for the first time, and it is their first real show of weakness. But do you think it's going to all end up flowing to the Liberals, or, as you said, because there is this view from people that, oh, well, they've done it again, they've betrayed us again? Do you think that could end up being a boon to One Nation, where people are more inclined to say, well, it's a curse on both their houses, they both break their promises, so let's try something new?
Yeah, well, I see, interestingly, you've got two senior Liberals in the last week have just defected, and that is Tina McQueen.
And Holly Hughes,
and Holly Hughes. Tina is a former federal vice president of the Liberal Party. And she has been in the trenches for 40 years. And indeed, a support of good causes. When John Ruddock created an organisation which sought to defend ANZUS, of all things, I'm not sure he would do so today.
I remember that. Yep.
But it was kind of Tina who wrote the check. And indeed, when Mark Latham, Rowan Dean, and I hosted an event in 2016 on US presidential election day in support of Donald Trump, when he was out 10-1 against in the polls. And at 8 o'clock in the morning at the rugby club, as it then was in the Sydney CBD, there was.
I remember my office was right upstairs from you guys. We could hear you.
Right. Yes,
I was a Crosby texter at the time.
Yeah, well, I'm going to get to Crosby texter in just a minute, brother. So strap yourself in.
This will be good. This will be good.
8 o'clock in the morning, there was nobody there. We had a big blow-up poster of Donald Trump and another of Hillary Clinton. Indeed, the US consulate in Sydney held an event at which only women were invited because the assumption was so confident that Hillary Clinton was about to break the glass ceiling. No blokes invited.
Yeah.
And then as the morning went on, our event, which was desolate and friendless at the start of the day, began to fill and fill and fill and fill. And all of those who said, I always believed Trump would win, are right. But Tina McQueen was there at 8 a.m. And when I had to fund the bar tab for $5,000, I turned to Tina and my mate, Chick Olson, said, do you guys feel like splitting it? And 2 credit cards immediately came out, which is the kind of friend you want to have in a moment.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
As Diogenes of Sinope once said, when asked, what's your favorite kind of wine? He said, wine for which someone else is paying. And the point is, the point of this narrative, which I've basically completely lost, is in terms of the Liberal Party and One Nation. One of the reasons why I also think Angus has a beating pulse is that firstly, I would say, notwithstanding your commentary on his budget response last week, which I listened to with interest on streaming, in which you were critical of the
highly critical,
including of its delivery, reading from notes, in which you made a fairly extensive critique of this pattern among modern politicians, in which I entirely endorse. But secondly, he has put some meat now on the policy bones of the Liberal Party, which they should have done a long time ago. And secondly, he has now come out after initially being seemingly reflexively hostile to Pauline and One Nation. As I understand it, he has come out last night in a long discussion, I think, with Paul Murray. You describe among my friends on Sky News. I'm not sure that Sky News describes me.
That's right. I forgot about that. Yes,
but
I forgot.
I'm happy. I'm always happy to assume friendship. I think it's the right assumption in general. But he's come out and said, look, we are now open pragmatically to any approach which will lead to the removal of this Labor government. And that indeed was always the correct approach. It was the approach the Liberal Party should have taken from the start. And I regard it as a significant part of Angus's apparent renewal. The Liberal Party and One Nation must be brothers in arms. The level of overlap between the two is, the level of overlap between the Libertarian Party, which, as you know, I'm a proud member of, and One Nation is high. There are material areas of difference, but we have no option at this stage but to work together to remove what I regard as a globalist, bureaucratic, internal coup to take over what was the Australian democracy, but in which now democracy is just a shop front mannequin where it matters not how you vote, you get the same result.
Managerial democracy, exactly. I mean, look, I don't think that's just the way you regard it. I think that's the way they're admitting that it actually is. I mean, we're seeing this in every bit of content that Labor puts out now. The coalition they are building is very clear. It's a coalition of the bloated public service. I mean, their only source of growth at this point is government expenditure. So it's people who are already on the teat. It's new arrivals, and it's young people. It's Generation Z and predominantly women who they think they can Shanghai into voting for them based on memes and vibes and some handouts and the promise of cheaper houses that I think we all know are never going to materialize. So I think they're being very clear about what they're doing. The question is, I mean, and this is where, a lot of the pro-Labor commentators, I do tend to agree with them, unfortunately, is an extremely powerful coalition. And so then you have this problem, like you say, Angus might have a beating heart, but, with One Nation, you've now got One Nation and the Liberals. How do you kind of reconcile that into a coherent narrative that can knock them out? I mean, one option I think could end up being very viable is, they all end up representing their own constituencies. The National Party always had its own constituency, didn't always agree with the Liberals. The Liberals have its own constituency. It might turn out across the span of history that period under Howard that you were in, where Howard was able to reconcile the values of a lot of working class Australians with the traditional values of Liberals, that might just be over, and that those people are now going to migrate to One Nation. And so you will end up having to get rid of these guys, a tripartite coalition, because without it, I don't think it's possible, unfortunately. And it's going to be a real challenge for the Liberals in those seats that they're so desperate to get back, kind of suicidally intent on retaking, like Kooyong and Goldstein and, they got Goldstein, Wentworth. The smart money would be on cutting those off. But I think, unfortunately, with people like Tim Wilson around, we're going to end up having this argument for some time. So hopefully it works itself out.
Yeah, I mean, if you want me to, delve into the dirty laundry of the
we love dirty laundry on sock, don't we, guys?
of the Liberal Party, I think you mentioned Crosby Textor.
Yeah.
And I have given credit to John Howard and his government for its decision to take a significant policy change back to the electorate, which I think is correct in principle and deserves respect. But we have to admit that even in the Howard era, which we look back upon now as some sort of halcyon paradise of
the golden age,
The truth is the Howard government was some fraction of what it needed to be to do its job, to make Australia competitive in an intensely contested world. And it simply shrugged its shoulders in an Ayn Rand style Atlas shrug when it needed conviction and resolution. And a big part of that was its fairly immediate submission to the Canberra bureaucratic orthodoxy on 85% of its agenda, and then to simply say, but we will contest, these things. We will contest budget sustainability. So we'll reduce government spending, certainly in the first and perhaps second term. And then we said, what else did we say? Oh, well, we will contest the industrial relations environment. We'll let Peter Reith have a fight on the waterfront, which he, famously succeeded in. But the truth is, in relation to the much harder sort of cultural challenges, the survival issues, the Howard government was some fraction of what it should have been. And so it was you really had the three sort of significant amigos around John Howard were Arthur Sinodinos, Tony Nutt, and Graham Morris. And Graham, who's a very likable kind of knockabout media guy, would wander around everywhere, most famously with the news poll in his jacket pocket going back 10 years. And if you're having a discussion with him, he'd simply pull out the news poll and drop it like my driving record at the New South Wales. And he'd say, well, at this moment, this policy was announced and the news poll went down to this number. And then we announced this policy and it went back up to that number. And, and so news poll was the Bible for Graham Morris. And then it's somebody like Tony Nutt, who is, your classic managerialist, who I was not at all shocked to find was the leading voice campaigning as kind of Liberals for the voice referendum for a second chamber in the federal parliament, right?
Yeah.
That was the big, most important issue that Tony Nutt wanted to create a massive new Aboriginal bureaucracy in Canberra.
Yeah.
And then we get to your mate, Crosby Textor. What's his name? Mark Textor.
Mark, yeah.
And Mark, who famously said, the base don't matter. He was the Liberal Party's pollster, and Textor, the great numbers guru, told everyone we must move the party to the left because the base don't matter. They have nowhere else to go. So I'd like to say to the genius cephalogist, the numbers man, Mark Textor, please meet Pauline Hanson.
Yeah. Well, the funniest thing about that, of course, is that after, he barely got by in the 2016 election. He was very lucky to have survived that one. But then, of course, they all bolt back off to the UK and run numbers for the Conservatives, and look where that got them. And that's the most interesting thing for me as someone who was in there, is looking at them now, and you can see that DNA still, even now. The death tax story that they put out yesterday had Crosby Textor written all over it. Their stance on immigration, it's the same playbook as the Tories disastrously used that failed to fend off reform. So you're exactly right. They need to leave all that stuff behind. They need to leave behind the last decade of failure and find a new strategy, because the old ones aren't working. Some of this stuff and some of these people date back to the 1990s.
Yeah.
Some of them don't even, own computers. Like, some of them don't even know how the internet works, but they still listen to them. But yeah, you'd be surprised, I think, how many of those people are still around. I know that Arthur Sinodinos, I think, still contributes to them. They're all on permanent speed dial whenever there's a political issue. It's going to be a huge problem for them.
Completely. It's this kind of transactional exercise in, what is the path of least resistance? What is the constituency of voters we need to satisfy in this moment? But all of it against the backdrop of don't rock the boat. And people like Rupert Lowe, to some extent Nigel Farage, I mean, it appears to me like my Donald Trump has essentially been co-opted by the machine. Indeed, as I was, as a junior minister in the Howard government, as Peter Costello's parliamentary secretary, I would confess, if we are in the cone of the confessional and McGowan is the priest, saying, Father, I have sinned. Okay, I was rolled well and truly, completely. The author I became when I was promoted with to this job as Costello's parliamentary secretary, I found dumped on my desk in front of me the final draft of what was called the Financial Services Reform Amendment Bill, which was this massive fat document, which the Treasury officials frankly assured me, oh, well, look, Minister, we really can't alter or change one line of this because it's the product of 18 months of consultation with every industry group, and it would cause an immense difficulty for us if we attempt to renegate, blah blah blah. And it was really, the whole document is a expression of the extent to which Treasury has become hostage to vested interest groups in whose interest it acts to protect vested privileges, to limit competition, and to preserve the current racket. And the truth is, on as we're discussing the budget, as a former junior Treasury minister, we have to say that part of the collapse has been the collapse of competence in the central agencies. And, so we go into this budget in a situation, we could pick a dozen different examples. Jim Chalmers, in a state of panic in the last 24 hours, has gone to a business breakfast and assured them all, look, don't worry, because the capital gains tax changes are really only going to change the effective rate, the amount we raise, from 19.7% to 21.8%. And he's saying the whole of this mess is designed to lift the government's revenue on capital gains by 2%, according to Treasury modelling. And
because it's to make it fairer, it's not to raise more money, so he says, but it's bullshit. It's total bullshit.
And all I would say to you, John, is, Treasury modelling told Malcolm Turnbull it would cost $2 billion to build the Snowy Hydro 2.0. $2 billion. Our latest costing in the last 8 weeks is $42 billion for the same project, based on original Treasury modelling of $2 billion. Treasury modelling under the genius Bill Shorten National Disability Insurance Scheme said that at its peak, it would be costing $14 billion. This budget, we learn that the NDIS will cost this government, this country, our taxpayers this year, $50 billion. Treasury modelling, $14 billion. Actual cost, $50 billion. And I just say to you that it's risible, it's trash. I barely struggle to flip on my laptop to say, John, how you going, mate? Because I regard this as such a crock of bull. And
I don't understand how over successive governments, and you would have, when did you start? You were already there when Howard was already there.
96. I was elected in.
You were a 96er, yeah. But this goes to the exact thing you're talking about, and why people like Tony Nutt, in particular, should have probably done a better job. I've seen this happen at a state level. Jeff Kennett did it. Barry O'Farrell attempted to do it with mixed success. But you're meant to get in there and clean house. That was always the idea, that someone would take government and you get a stack of resignations on your desk, and then you'd start finding out who else need to be exited.
Yeah.
This is how things were conducted for decades. And then it's like one day we woke up and we stopped doing it, which has been an absolute disaster. And now it's because of the erosion of the institutions that generate public servants, whether it's Angus Taylor or Pauline Hanson, we have this very unenviable scenario where, well, who are they going to get in? Best case scenario, where it's Angus or Pauline or a coalition of both, and they do get in and they do the things we want to do, and they put a hot knife through the public sector. Who do they replace them with? There's no one there. I mean, you talk to the guys in this chat. I mean, a lot of them are young. None of them have been going through, public policy degrees. None of them are economists, because everyone's sitting there going, I don't want to work in government. Yeah. Why would a young person today aspire to do that? Yeah. So they're going to really struggle to form a government that works with the labor force that they have. I mean, you'll have to go in. I'll probably have to go in. Like, we'll all have to take jobs to be able to do it.
I suspect I'm going to fail the OH&S cultural sensitivity test on day
That was a while ago, man. Yeah, the water under the bridge. Like, I don't think I'm much better.
But this is the libertarian argument, which I think is correct. The sort of Rothbard von Mises argument is you cannot reform this beast. You can only make it smaller.
Yeah.
And there is no any attempt. People talk to me, and I saw some argument taking place online in which you might have been implicated about, the ABC charter, how it might be amended or not amended. And, we have Tony Abbott going to the election saying no cuts to the ABC. I mean, the whole of the ABC should be cut.
Yeah.
The ABC is a lumbering, Pravda-style, Kremlin-era relic of a time when public broadcasting began, and we only had, in effect, 5, 6, 7 major broadcasters. And whereas tonight, the whole of the Australian people, indeed the world, can get the pearls falling from the lips and the mind of John McGowan for nothing.
I know, every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Yeah, for free. I charge for this. Yeah,
I know there are data centers in Ohio and in Siberia and all over the world which are just clicking into gear to accept the traffic that we are generating. But the point is that the ABC is just a $1.6 billion subsidy of the state to itself. And it must go on day one of a rational government. It must go root and branch. The sort of headquarters of the ABC in Ultimo should be turned into a mixed martial arts judo workout Pilates area. It would be more useful and productive. But there's no way.
Well, and the one in Parramatta should be a car park. They've got a really great spot for a car park in Parramatta.
Sure. Well, I'm a great believer in car parks, although I note the City of Sydney now has a fatwa as effective as any ever delivered by the mullahs of Tehran that Sydney must build no more car parks. And this is just, we could pick 100 different examples. I mean, the first example, when I go to the budget, and I see the Treasurer comes out in sort of statement mine saying, oh, look, the fundamental commitment of this government is to make housing more affordable to young people. And then the next paragraph is, and we're going to bring in, 350,000 brand new migrants, the largest number ever imported to this country in its history. Yeah. And those two paragraphs just sit side by side. Okay. Yeah. One obviously completely destroys the other. And I meant to take this guy seriously. I meant to take this government seriously.
So the best he can possibly do out of the whole budget is break even. That's all he can achieve. Like, there's no hope of making it cheaper. There's no hope of cutting down the actual number of people coming in. So that's all he's got is barely breaking even and possibly avoiding a recession. I mean, this is not the big vision that he claimed that he was claiming when he went into it. On immigration, because this is, I think, one of the most important issues. Do you think the Libs are going far enough on this? And you were there, of course, during the early boat people days. I mean, do you think the Libs have it in them to actually present a viable immigration policy to the Australian public in 2028?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting question. If you ask why Why have successive governments on both sides been committed to this massive inflow of migrants? And I say there's sort of 3 or 4 major reasons why. But one of them is we have to take responsibility for the fact as citizens that we're not having any children. Now, I mean, McGowan has obviously got decent genetics. I don't know if you have reproduced. I haven't asked you.
Not to the best of my knowledge, although some people accuse me of having done so.
Okay, well, John, I'm going to tell you, frankly, I regard you as some fraction of a man, right? Until you reproduce, you're not a man. You're not a full man. And we cannot whinge and moan and bitch about the government saying we've got to bring in large numbers, we've got to import youth into this country, if none of us are prepared to, to have a child. And I say, well, you may say, others may say to me, oh, well, the deal that's being offered to the male contemplating this project is not the greatest deal. In view of the risks which have now been created, in particular, not least by governments. But I just say, okay, that's a point we need to acknowledge. If you cannot reproduce your population, you've already culturally committed suicide, and it's purely an algorithm of how long it takes until the last Australian. The second point I would say is we have to import youth because of the collapse in productivity across this country. And that results largely in a significant part by the extent to which successive governments have entrenched the power of trade unions, which are just a factional cabal extracting sort of regulatory rents from employers at no risk to themselves in a way that makes production much more expensive. We have to accept that Labor in particular has this motive to import more marginal seat voters who will be grateful to Labor for the invitation to come. And I think that was a significant part of the whole Obama-Biden mass migration project, which was to, in effect, gerrymander the electorate in such a way that it wasn't possible for a conservative sort of aspirational, self-reliant party to win. But then I think there is the final one, which is the extent to which our leadership class has become hostage to what, for want of a more elegant expression, to a globalist consensus, which Hillary Clinton described, in a private meeting to bankers, not publicly, as hemispheric convergence. And we've got absolutely explicit, of moving the South to the North, of feeling. I think there's something like Nigel Farage was saying to me, I think they've got 5,000 hotels spread across England, Scotland, and Wales, which are just simply absolutely packed with relatively young males, overwhelmingly from Africa and the Middle East, under this policy, which is just a deliberate, peaceful invasion. And the native population just has not had the strength or the survival impulse to push back. So I kind of say, I am frankly pessimistic about the Western world and about Australia. I think we're arguing over what I say is a 5% chance that this culture can be turned around.
Look, I'm a bit more bullish on it. I mean, look, I used to think exactly like you did. I thought, that, one on productivity, two on birth rates, that it was going to be inevitable and you would have to accept some form of immigration into a country like Australia if we couldn't accommodate it any other way. But we've since figured out a few things here. I mean, one, our productivity gains from the record-breaking immigration we've had have been woeful. So, I mean, that becomes a policy question of, well, are we bringing in the right people, whatever. I mean, some of the stats that have come out recently on the actual productivity of the recent, we'll call it the Morrison wave post-COVID, where you're talking about less than 9% even end up in full-time work in many cases. I think the productivity argument's kind of settled on that. What will, even if, maybe you could recalibrate things to get more productive people in, but we're already saddled with half these guys anyway. But the other thing that's changed massively since these debates around population have been happening is we're on the cusp of a revolution in automation, a revolution in how productivity is even calculated, right? Artificial intelligence now is taking the labor filter out of productivity for the first time. So you used to only be able to generate productivity through labor. Now, productivity is being generated through megawatt hours. So we are on the cusp of, like in so many policy problems, I mean, often technology will just solve them for you. And so whilst you're right that we do have to breed, or the guys in the chat do, I've got too many options to settle down just yet, some of these problems are being solved for us. And we do really have to look at what the world's going to look like in the future, because we have a looming labor crisis in this country, because we're not going to have jobs for all the people we brought in just a few short years. Now the government can stymie some of them. They can go slow on things like driverless cars. They can go slow on AI investment, which they're already doing. But it's going to catch up. And worse, I mean, you could end up with a scenario where, the quality of life is so great in countries that have smaller populations and have energy surpluses that the most productive people in our society leave and just take off. And then, you're not only having too many people coming in and diluting us culturally, you also have the people who could save us going and living in Singapore and going and living elsewhere. So having said that, I'm still reasonably bullish on it, but I do see your point. We were going to talk about a bit about international politics as well. You were saying we got Thomas Massey's decision coming tomorrow. Now, like you were saying, you were a very big Trump guy back in 2016. What's your thinking on Trump now? And what's your thinking about particularly the last few months, Epstein, Iran? What is your thinking on it at the moment?
Yeah, well, it's, John, you're asking me now, what is a hard question? And because for me, as you rightly say, I was one of my first public endorsement of Trump was January 2015.
Yeah, it's on your Wikipedia page.
Yeah, after, oh, right. Yeah. I don't ever read my Wikipedia post.
Well, it's actually a really good one. And so whoever's done it likes you. Yeah. So it's not.
Is that right? Oh, well, I'm delighted. I might return to it. And I came out and endorsed Trump in a 3-part endorsement, saying, number one, Trump would win the GOP nomination. Number two, he would win the presidential election. And number three, he would be good. And I formed that view after a trip to the US, in which I visited New York, Los Angeles, and San Francisco, effectively, raising money for a project. And in that time, I had 50 Uber and taxi journeys. And on each occasion, I took the opportunity, as you would have from Crosby Texter, to poll and cross-examine the Uber driver. And by the end, I came back and formed the view that Trump was going to win. And I had read The Art of a Deal virtually as a teenager, and I was quite deeply impacted by it. I liked the whole story. And I had followed Trump and wondered if he would run. And when he ran, my ears pricked up. And then when I did this survey, I just formed the view that he would win. But what we are seeing is the splintering and fragmentation of the so-called MAGA, Make America Great Again movement within the grand old party, the Republican Party, is splintering. And Trump effectively remade the GOP in his own image. He became the dominant figure in the way that Obama became the dominant figure of the Democratic Party. But it was based, and I say there is the sound of breaking bones in the GOP at the moment, in the same way as I say there is within Labor, because of a breach of trust. And while if you had an algorithm that is to measure a certain distance into the life of any administration, how many promises has it kept and broken? I mean, Trump has done some tremendously positive things, in my opinion. I mean, the very first one was to secure the southern border. And in the same way, Tony Abbott deserves great credit for securing the Australian border. And when Abbott said, we're going to stop the boats, Julia Gillard said, there's no way to stop the boats because it's a supply side issue. And then Tony teamed up with the general and with resolve, with a plan, and they stopped boats. Donald Trump did the same thing in the expression "build the wall," and he built it. And if a country doesn't have borders, it's not a country; it's something else.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Trading zone at best.
But I have to say to you, there is this deep sense of grief, of disillusionment across the MAGA base, which is now frankly split right down the middle. And Thomas Massey's election, which is taking place in effect, the polling booths will open in about the first results come in at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. So 8 a.m. is 6 p.m. in Kentucky. So we'll know by 9 or 10 o'clock tomorrow if Thomas Massey has survived. And interestingly, I sat around with a group of my libertarian mates, smart boys and girls whose judgment I respect. And I asked the question, which I'm inclined to ask from time to time, which is, who is the living human being to whom you are not related, whom you most admire? And I think it's a question which can often sort of flush out where a person's mind is. It's not always the easiest question to answer. Interestingly, lots and lots of people say, I don't know. I believe it is your, as indeed the Stoics, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, others would have said, I mean, you must have a hierarchy of admiration to know what is good and bad and what you love. And as Seneca famously says in his greatest short essay on the shortness of life, the greatest freedom of all is the freedom to love and to hate, which is one of the reasons why I'm opposed to all hate speech legislation. While I encourage love over hatred, I still believe it's a fundamental human right to choose whom you love and hate. Indeed, Epictetus, the Greek slave philosopher, who was the most quoted philosopher in Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, says that what you desire, what you love and hate is one of only 5 things that you can ever really own. Speaking of Epictetus and broken bones, this is something of a tenuous segue. But the great scholar Origen records the story, which is told of Epictetus's owner, who was a Roman noble. Indeed, he was the secretary to Nero. And he owned Epictetus, and he was so determined that Epictetus should never escape that he decided to cripple his slave. And so the Origen records the story of his master twisting Epictetus's leg over a beam. And Epictetus says to him, well, if you continue with that force, you will break my leg. And his master continued, and the leg snapped. And Epictetus said, well, I told you, you would break my leg. And that's what's the point is that, the MAGA movement got behind Trump on the basis that he was going to drain the swamp. There would be no new wars. The doctrine of forever wars, the idea of building the US economy around a permanent war would end. And that we would begin to get the American budget under control.
Still hasn't done that.
You know, that we would release the Epstein files, that we would practice transparency, that we would not be run by billionaires. And so you've now had this fragment, this fracturing taking place in which Thomas Massey is at the eye of the storm. And it's when I was saying to this group of libertarians, who do you love? And one of them, I think it might have been Dr. John Humphreys, the founder of our party, who said his favorite living human being was Thomas Massey. And in 12 hours, we will find out whether Thomas Massey is elected or defeated. And the point of it is that Donald Trump has endorsed Massey's opponent, who is an entirely forgettable bloke whose name I can't remember. But
Massey, it was the same with all his opponents that he's tried to knock off in recent months. They're all losers.
But I see, if we go to Polymarket, as a cephalogist yourself, you will no doubt be familiar with it among a range of sources, which commands a degree of respect because it is a market backed by money. It's not just people bloviating to a pulser on the phone. It's people betting their hard-earned on a result. And Massey has gone from consistently between 60 and 70 cents in the dollar to get re-elected. And he's fallen down from 70 to 60 and 60 to 50. And then in the last 24 hours, he's really fallen from 50 to 40. And
he was moving when you texted me about it earlier. He actually moved a few cents because that was the first thing I looked at. I wanted to see what Massey's Polymarket numbers were doing. And in the time from when you and I were messaging to when you started the show, he's moved 3 cents. So there's a lot of money moving behind it. That is going to be fascinating. It'll give Trump a bloody nose, and like you said, it'll be the sound of breaking bones. I mean, he's still living in the shadow of the failure on the Epstein files. His performance on Iran is woeful. I don't know what he does to get back from this, really.
And a lot of people
November could be really bad.
Some people are saying, we've obviously got the midterms coming up. Somebody like Megyn Kelly is really saying, well, because he's not recontesting, he's really behaving like someone who says, I don't care what the result is. And just as I think it is possible that the happiest person about the Farah by-election result may have been Susan Lee. I could be wrong. I think, some are saying, well, Trump may take a certain satisfaction in the fact that nobody else can be Donald Trump. But as you say, I mean, I am a kind of a peacenik. I am a lover of peace. I am a lover of the olive branch. The olive is a symbol of peace because it takes many 5 years or something before an olive branch produces fruit. And if we look back, as we always should, to the wisdom of the ancients, we find something which is described as the Pax Minoa, the Minoan peace, named after the 1,000 or so years from about 2300 to 1300, 1200 BC, where the Mediterranean was run by what we call the Minoans. We don't actually know what they call themselves because we haven't deciphered their script as yet. But we have discovered their beautiful palaces, their extraordinary artwork. And one of the things that shocked the archaeologists was the apparent absence of weapons, the absence of palace walls, the absence of defensive buttresses. And it appears that the Mediterranean was for 1,000 years, and this is the precursor to the kind of emergence of Greece with Homer and Hesiod after a 400-year dark age, which I suspect it is not impossible we might be about to enter ourselves. But the point is, they managed to live with an extraordinary diversity of language, race, and religion with a very high level of peace. And the Minoans famously persecuted and punished the pirates, but they wished the trade to continue unmolested. And we find ourselves in this extraordinary situation where our guys, who I'm meant to be, I stood in front of the Lincoln Memorial as a 16-year-old at dawn, reading the Gettysburg Address with my spine tingling. And I wanted Australia to be the 51st state of the United States. And subsequently worked for an American senator named Mark Hatfield from Oregon on Capitol Hill, which was just a fantastic experience as a young man. And Hatfield was committed to peace. He was a, quote, dovish Republican from Oregon, had the Senate appropriations leader, been there for 30 years. And, Hatfield had a guy on his staff whose whole job was alleviation of world hunger. And he made multiple trips to North Korea during the famine. And I sat in his office when Hatfield picked up the phone to, the United States' biggest grain exporter. And he had the grain exporter on one phone. He had the biggest shipping magnate on the other phone. And he said, lads, we've got a food crisis. People are starving in North Korea. I want you to take your ship to your port and load it with grain and take it to Pyongyang. No questions asked, no money changing hands. And the boy said, Senator, consider it done. And it was done. And that was
the kind of things, yeah. But that was the United States for a long time, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm certainly a lot more hawkish than you on these things. I mean, I was extremely impressed when he pulled off, the coup in both senses of the word in Venezuela, right? Because if you think about, the insane might of the American military and what it could be used for. I mean, the idea of just sneaking into a country and abducting a dictator so you can face trial in your own country. I mean, I think that's what that should be used for. He led on, though, the whole world that somehow he was going to repeat that performance in Iran. And it's just been an unmitigated disaster. And I really don't see how he walks it back from here. I mean, we were told, this is going to be a quick war. He was saying they're going to be destroyed in a few hours. That was several thousand hours ago. And he's put off another strike today, as he desperately tries to cobble together a new peace deal. So yeah, I think he's in a lot of trouble over it because he hasn't satisfied either cohort in the GOP. He hasn't satisfied the Hawks because they don't like a man who's losing a war, and all those people who signed up to the MAGA project on the promise of no new wars. He's never going to satisfy them either. So he's just left himself, and as you say, maybe he just doesn't care anymore because he doesn't have to run again. But he's left himself high and dry with no friends and no one to defend him.
Look, I see someone in the chat, Hyperborean, is saying, well, what does Ross, the peacenik, plan to do about Iranian nukes?
Yeah.
And look, I think it's a very fair question, okay, because we peaceniks must live in the real world. And just as I say, the warmongers who love the smell of sulfur and the sound of bombs exploding fall in love with their own position. We peaceniks need to have a credible answer to rational questions, and that's one of them. And I simply say to you that what you see in Iran today with a authoritarian theological dictatorship is a product in part of Western intelligence agencies deliberately destroying a democratically elected government in Iran, which made the mistake of seeking to nationalize its oil industry because it felt that the people of Iran were being exploited. And whatever the merits of that argument, I don't think anybody disputes that the agencies of the United Kingdom and the United States took a decision to remove a foreign leader because he did not suit their economic interests. And more particularly, that decision was followed by effectively 40 years of the most intense economic sanctions against Iran. And we libertarians are emphatically opposed to economic sanctions and indeed to tariffs generally. We are Ricardians. We are John Stuart Mill devotees. We are David Hume supporters who say, you know, David Hume said, I wish that the policy of England was built around the flourishing of Spain and Italy and Germany and indeed of France in a mutual commitment to free trade where each party does the thing they do best and has access to and from each other's markets without delay, dispute or tax. And indeed, we find, if you want to say, if you look at, say, the city of Hong Kong, after the extraordinary abuse of the United Kingdom through the British East India Company, getting an entire nation and civilization addicted to opium in order to improve its balance of payments, and handing over Hong Kong as part of the deal for 100 years. The British did have the good sense to declare Hong Kong a, quote, free port. And the meaning of a free port was that there should be no tariffs or taxes on goods either entering or leaving the port. And it was on that foundation that the world witnessed the emergence from a little collection of fishing villages and swamps into the most exquisite, beautiful, and prosperous city in the world. And we libertarians wish to export the example of Hong Kong to the whole world, because indeed we say that we libertarians say that the only hope, the way to deal with a country like China, or I would say Iran, in answer to your, mate's question, is we must build an asset-owning middle class, built upon free trade, built upon the free flow of investment in and out of the country. And it is the asset-owning middle class that acts as a bulwark against the more authoritarian, rapacious, and dictatorial instincts of a theocratic state. And if you want to defang the mullahs, you must build an alternative source of power. What we've learned since the beginning of Operation Epic Fury is that air superiority doesn't get the job done. You can drop as many bombs as you want. You will destroy a lot of infrastructure. You will make oil, you'll make a tank full of petrol in Smithfield in Sydney 40-50% more expensive, but you won't change the regime. So I say
someone needs to go in there at some point. No, you're exactly right. I mean, but I don't think that's a bridge too far for him. And if that was a bridge too far for him, he never should have gone near the place. Yeah. Right? This is the same reason why they decided not to go into Ukraine. I mean, American air power could be bombarding Russian positions, all over the northwestern flank, from Donetsk all the way up to Kharkiv. Yeah. But they don't, because they know it will be pointless, because sooner or later someone's got to go in there. And the unwillingness to do that, which is probably justified, is the reason why you shouldn't do it in the first place. We had another interesting question that someone just posted earlier. Yeah, I want to get you on to the libertarians, because here we go. I mean, Amal says, how could libertarians ever succeed when the only time a libertarian movement has succeeded is in Argentina, where statism got really bad? Which is kind of true. Now, but if you think back, I was doing a lot of podcasts this time last year, right? Well before the One Nation wave, the surge. And your numbers were looking great. I mean, comparatively. I think at one point libertarians were cresting 4.5%, like, getting a lot of good media. Now, One Nation's kind of coalesced a lot of the right-wing minor party vote. But do you think, when you look at this budget, when you look at how bad things are getting, do you think we could get to that point where, we do end up becoming another Argentina, where, it'll be you guys that pick the crown up from the gutter as opposed to Pauline?
Yeah, I think it's a good question from Amal RT9XD. Look, I'll be honest with you and say that, I joined the Libertarian Party after I got expelled from the Liberal Party.
Shame.
And I basically think if you don't get expelled from the Liberal Party, you're probably not trying hard enough.
Yeah, I should have waited to get kicked out, actually.
Once it got sort of overtaken by, it became the lobbyist faction. It became the Michael Fadius Party. And it was just a beautifully run racket for lobbyists. So then I got booted. I was a homeless refugee, and actually my son, Dougal, had, of his own volition, joined the Libertarian Party, then the Liberal Democrats. And he came to me and said, Dad, you can't just effectively retire. You can't just give up. You've got to still have your hands on the oars. There is one party which is actually a conviction party. And it's the now Libertarian Party. And we actually believe nearly all of what is written into the Liberal Party's We Believe statement. And the difference between the two organisations is that one actually believes it and the other one doesn't. For one, it's a kind of a decorative wallpaper. For the Libertarians, it's actually a set of convictions. And so I took his advice and joined the party. And I intended just to be a completely private member, just turning up as a volunteer on polling booths, but through a set of circumstances I didn't control, largely focused around the nomination of John Ruddock to become the party's candidate for the New South Wales Legislative Council. I became the president of the New South Wales division of the party. And at a time when Ruddock also succeeded, as you say, on pretty good numbers, and became the first Libertarian member of the New South Wales Legislative Council. If you said to me, Ross, are you disappointed that you haven't gotten greater traction as a political movement, I would say, yes, I am. Do I take a degree of personal responsibility for it? I suppose I must. What do I think is a scenario under which the Libertarians might really come into their own? Indeed, there has been discussion about whether the Libertarians should simply fold themselves into One Nation. Somebody like Tina McQueen, or Holly Hughes, presumably could have had a look at the option of joining the Libertarian Party. They have elected, in this case, to join Pauline. Look, our view is that there must be, in the political landscape, a party which is intensely, permanently committed to a non-negotiable core set of beliefs built around individual liberty, free speech, low taxes, smaller government, and that must be willing to not trade away those principles and values according to the exigencies of the moment. And we think that there is virtue. Maintaining a political party under the current levels of bureaucratic control of Australian politics is actually a very difficult and complex exercise. And it is made complex, expensive, and difficult deliberately by the major parties to ensure no minor party ever emerges through a competitive contest of ideas. And so we think it's important no matter what. I mean, Abraham Lincoln's motto was, I prepare and one day my chance will come. We wish
Jack
to
Lancer, one of our guys in the chat's very fond of mentioning to me that in Lincoln's first ever election, he only got 1,000 votes, and it was in then his second election he became president. So it just goes to show if you stick by your guns.
And in a way, we have to say Pauline is earning a deserved dividend for the fact. I mean, I was catching the train the other day, as I do to reduce my carbon footprint. And a mate of mine got on by accident, sat opposite me, reached out, shook hands, Ross. And he didn't say, "G'day, how are you? How's your health?" He said, "Ross, when are you going to fold into One Nation?" And smart bloke, would actually be an outstanding candidate for either party. James Kell, I hope you run for one or the other. But we just believe that and he said one of the reasons he liked Pauline was that she's been at it for 30 years. She's been the subject of incredible persecution. She's been thrown in jail, but she's still turning up, and she's still arguing essentially the same position over 3 decades. And you get points for that. And, you know, if that's what the Libertarian Party has to do, that's what we'll do.
Well, I think there's something deep, and there's something really important about it, which goes to the kind of moribund nature of the major parties, is that once upon a time, a party stood by its convictions. And if those convictions were rejected at the ballot box, they said, well, they were rejected, but we're not changing them. We'll just wait until the people change their mind. But we don't do that anymore, and we haven't done that for decades. People like Mark Textor and Linton Crosby are one of the reasons, as well as their peers in Labor. Now that's not the practice. Now when a party loses, they go back to the drawing board and they say, well, how can we change our convictions to fit the electorate? And this is what we're seeing now from the Australian Labor Party, is they're changing their convictions to meet the changing demographics. They're abandoning working class people. They're abandoning their own cohorts in the unions. They're abandoning everything they ever stood for because they see demography changing. So Australia does need someone, and we've got Pauline Hanson, but we do need people to stand there and say, well, if, you know, maybe all we'll get this time is 1%, but if eventually maybe the people come around to it. And I think this is what the commenter was getting at, is that on a long enough time frame, you know, we end up as bad as Argentina. Maybe your time will come.
Yeah, well, I hope that there is something left to salvage. And, you know, I appreciate your optimism. And I'm hoping that you're right and I'm wrong. I think one of the reasons why I'm pessimistic about the United States and critical of Donald Trump is that they're now cracking 40 trillion in debt. So the interest on the debt, on US debt, is costing as much as the whole US social security system. So here you have in Australia, we've got a situation where we have been, in effect, gifted an entire continent to ourselves. We've got a magnificent coastline. We've got the world's most abundant supply of uranium. We've got the world's most abundant supply of hard coking coal. We've got either the most or the second most supply of liquid natural gas, yet we've got a $1 trillion deficit.
And that's before you get into things. It's before you get into our rare earth minerals. It's before you get into arable land, like fishing stocks.
We've got a smart population. We've had virtually uninterrupted peace. We've never been invaded, and we've got a $1 trillion deficit. Well, that says to me that the government is just entirely not fit for purpose. Australia is the marine mammal. Charging towards the beach. We are beaching ourselves. I say this.
Well, let me ask.
Go ahead.
Just on what you were just saying. Well, let me ask you this, because I think this is an interesting question. Do you, when you say it's not fit for purpose, do you think that it is not fit for purpose because of the character of the people that are in there, their level of competency, the things they're trying to achieve? Or do you think there might be something deeper about how our government is designed and the actual system itself? Where do you fall on that question?
Mate, you've got to forgive me. I just got distracted by Sir Walmart Golem in the chat. Just replay the question for me.
Well, I was going to say, do you think that I'll put it up so you don't forget it? Maybe you can ask
yeah.
Walmart
I've got it. Okay, about the quality of leadership.
Yeah. Well, is it a question of the quality of leadership, or is it a question of how the system's designed? Is it the government not fit for purpose, or are the people in the government not fit for purpose?
Yeah, look, I think there has been, I believe there has been a kind of internal coup which has taken place. I think when the Berlin Wall came down at the end of the 80s, a lot of people thought that the Francis Fukuyama thesis was correct, that history had ended. Western, quote, liberal democratic private property, free enterprise had won the argument. But I think what the left did, following, people like Saul Alinsky, they came up with a new strategy. And we have to say it was a very effective and successful strategy. And it was that we will take over the democracy incrementally by using taxpayers' money against taxpayers. And we will gradually colonize, occupy, and control the entire bureaucratic machine to the extent that it simply does not matter who the punters vote for. We will do whatever the hell we like, and we will implement our agenda. And so that's really what's happening. And part of that is the crushing of any sort of native or nationalist sentiment, any kind of patriotic feeling, any sort of ethnic or cultural identity, and getting the taxpayer to fund his or her own destruction is the genius of the model. And we just sort of sit back there and just take it, getting slap, and, if I look at, for example, capital gain, without wanting to get dragged back into the gory details, I mean, I have looked at capital gains long before this budget and seen it as an absolute grim reaper. Working its way across innovation, enterprise, and risk-taking behaviour in this economy for decades. And I well remember going to a significant commercial landowner on the one side, and I had a significant business operator on the other side. And the landowner had a piece of property which was perfect for the operator, and he could offer him a great price for it. And the owner just had it basically ticking over. And I went to the owner and I said, mate, have I got a deal for you? And he said, look, it's a great price. I really like it. I can totally see the logic of the deal. He said, but the operation of the tax system is such that I'm going to take such a haircut on sale, and then I've got to do something else with that, with whatever I take out of the deal. It doesn't make sense for me to do the transaction. And that story is being repeated 10,000 times across the economy. And there's just this massive wet blanket of tax hanging over economic activity in this country. And so the idea that you as a treasurer then sit around and look at one of the most egregious and oppressive measures in the whole economy, and your best idea is make it worse. That's where Australia is today. That's a country with a death wish. And I will say, in response to your question, that there is a thesis, the Eastern, the Russians, for example, their argument, Putin's argument is that there is a kind of crisis of leadership in the West. And if you go through and you look at the names of the generation of leaders that we have produced, and you could go through Angela Merkel, Emmanuel Macron, Justin Trudeau, Barry Obama, Joe Biden, Jacinda Ardern, Malcolm Turnbull, Klaus Schwab, Antonio Guterres, Bill Gates, Michael Bloomberg, Al Gore, Larry Fink, George Soros, Mark Cannon. This is a failure.
Yeah.
This is a whole cadre and class of leadership that is not fit for purpose.
And I think you've really hit the nail on the head with that. When you reel off the list of names, I mean, some of which are in politics, but a lot more are in capital. I know some people criticised me about this when I put it on Twitter the other day because they said I was giving Labor too much credence. But a part of me feels like their attack on investment in this budget is a deliberate attack on the changing character of investment right now globally. Because, like you said, the Schwabs and the Soroses and the Gateses, these people dominated investment. And, if you look at the emergence of the tech boom, the direction of US capital, the kind of stuff that the BlackRocks and the Blackstones have invested in over the last decade, with everything they touched came with the woke strings attached. You are starting to sense a significant change. The richest man in the world is Elon Musk. The most influential tech leader in the United States is now Alex Karp. Palmer Luckey, a guy who was making video games 5 years ago, is now making cruise missiles. And you look at these guys' politics and the emerging politics out of the Silicon Valley, it's not like how it was. And so a part of me ponders, maybe Labor don't even want investment anymore, because if there's one thing we've learned from the last 20, 30 years, investment comes with ideological strings. But maybe the future's investment is going to have different ideological strings that are going to be a bit more focused on defending Western civilization. So I think that character has started to change. And a part of me wonders, is Labor not just throwing up a wall? Do they not feel, with the rise of Trump and the rise of the reform and restore movements in the UK, do they not feel under threat and think, we've got to build a wall right now so it breaks on us, so we don't end up copying the populist revolution at home?
Yeah, well, there is, there's the question when you see the results, which are just so bad, when you see the inheritance being so obviously squandered. Don't get me started on tobacco excise tax. Where you've got a federal minister for health, Mark Butler, whose idea is to crank up tobacco excise tax to a point where we can see that in 2018 the Commonwealth was collecting 16 billion in tobacco excise revenue. This year they're collecting 6 billion. So he's just pissing up against the wall 10 billion from 2018. And that's a direct subsidy to the banditos, the Comancheros, the Finks, and the coffin cheaters.
And their assets in Pakistan and Iraq, where everything comes from now.
But so the question is, is it deliberate? Do these results represent a kind of a failure of a leadership class who have just grown up somehow isolated from reality in such a way that they're not capable of negotiating with reality? They live completely inside a bubble and they don't understand what's happening outside the bubble. Or is it, in fact, an absolutely deliberate and calculated plan over a couple of generations to collapse the society? And I'm sort of open-minded on that question. I do think when you point to some of the new leadership that is breaking through, and seemingly the cracks in the woke phalanx, I think it's interesting. I think whether it comes in time, remains to be seen. I am in the embarrassing situation where I think the two most rational voices, I may get shot for this, I may get placed in a gulag, but I think that Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin are consistently rational and acting in their national interest. And, you know, Xi Jinping goes to Davos, and he's the only bastard arguing for free trade.
Yeah.
He's the head of the Communist Party, right?
Yeah.
And we've got our bloke out there, and he wakes up every morning inventing a new tariff.
Well, of course, they both have the incredible benefit of owning all the private enterprise within their own country, one way or the other. And I think, you know, Xi's probably in a much stronger position than Putin is at the moment, because Xi was smart enough not to start any wars, and Putin's too dumb to finish his. But I do see your point. You are absolutely right. You know, the question is, you know, to which extent are their respective global ambitions genuine? To which extent are they not just exaggerated by, you know, the media and intelligence agencies in our own country? And to what extent they're a threat? Now, I tend to think, you know, Russia's probably are exaggerated, and Russia's are not a threat. And, you know, Russia is just a brushfire conflict that needs to be resolved one way or the other. But I think Xi is very much does have larger ambitions than simply within his own borders, and that becomes the problem for us here. So it's a hard one to untangle.
Oh no, mate. Australia's China is in since Paul Keating. You know, we have to say, I say Gough Whitlam was right. My father's very first trip on a plane was to Taipei. He was a massive supporter of Taiwan. He was a significant critic of the Chinese Communist Party. And I sort of inherited some of his instincts and prejudices. But we have to say, in terms of the way China could have evolved and the way that it has, I mean, China could so easily have become another version of North Korea. But even North Korea starts to look quite rational and centrist compared to the behavior of NATO, which I regard as a completely malignant, corrupt war machine. NATO wakes up every morning and asks, what new country can we drop bombs on? And I say
so long as it's not actually Ukraine, just any country other than Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I just regard, I am disgusted by the participation of the West in this proxy war, where in effect we say to what is really a Slavic brotherly civil war, they're basically all Russians. And they're just, we set up a contest between, you know, fiberglass and explosive drones and human flesh, and just sit by and cheer and encourage more of it as, you know, 1.5 million people, young men primarily, get their limbs blown apart. Because I say this is our war. We wanted this war. We created this war.
You know, well, NATO created the war. I mean,
yeah, it's NATO's war.
NATO could have stopped it at any point, and they failed to.
They haven't lost, you know, the NATO headquarters in Brussels or The Hague or wherever it is. I forget. It's just this massive Taj Mahal. It's one of the biggest buildings in Europe. And it's just a collection of BMWs and Mercedes and Audis coming in and out, with generals awarding each other medals and exchanging arms contracts. And, you know, none of them get within 100 miles of the risk of danger, but they're all massively funneling cash and bombs into the most corrupt administration in Eastern Europe, which is Vladimir Zelensky's, to continue this carnage and avoidable bloodshed. And I find it very hard to forgive Boris Johnson at a moment when, you know, the UK has played a shockingly bad role. It's kind of like reprising its, you know, its foreign policy in the Opium Wars, of funneling cash with the objective of holding Russia's head underwater, because it's been nursing a 200-year grudge against Russia because Catherine the Great, supported the American revolutionaries against, the insane King George III. And they've had this sort of Russia phobia, Russia grudge going on for 200 years because they see Russia as sort of an equivalent sized power. And it's just this completely destructive impulse. And the fact that Australia sends tanks, bushmasters, helicopters, and cash, $1 billion worth of victuals to keep this war going, when we are $1 trillion in debt, and we haven't got an armed forces that could, that could fight its way out of a brown paper bag. It's just disgusts me.
You know what, Ross? I think we've been going for an hour and a half now, and I think we have to actually put a pin in it, unfortunately. But I could keep going. This has been a great interview. I think you've actually been my favorite guest that I've had on. Usually we just talk about dumb stuff. Usually it's just guys ranting about video games and, Abby Chatfield memes and things like that. So this has been extremely fun, and I want to thank you very much for coming on, mate. I hope everyone in the chat liked it. Some of you engaged with it. Some of you got bored because you lack IQ, I believe. But I had fun, and that's what matters. It's my show. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming on, Ross. The videos will be uploaded to Twitter and YouTube later if you want to share them. TLD's in the chat for Ross. Guys, thank you very much. I'm going to stick on for a little bit and do some housekeeping with the guys and cover off a couple of things from the end of the week. And hopefully we'll see you back on the show, mate. Thank you very much. And I'll take what you said about having kids to heart. I'm going to get right on Hinge as soon as we're off air.
Get on with it.
There's no women in the chat, so there's no options in here.
Can't find a good one. There must be one in Tasmania somewhere.
Oh, I've been trying, man. I've been trying.
Right.
It's
okay. Keep going. Yeah. You have my blessing, support, and encouragement. Keep going.
I'm going to put that on my Tinder profile. I'm going to say Ross Cameron approved match.
Yes.
Mating prospects.
All right.
Save Western civilization. See you, brother. Bye.
Thanks, buddy. Good night.
Thanks, mate. I'll take him off. Well, that was Ross Cameron, chaps. I liked that. That was fun. There was some very interesting stuff in there. I think he might have seen one of you post about the Marcus Aurelius drinking game, and that's why he only did it once, because he got through the entire corpus of historical literature before finally getting to it. Look, fantastic guy, extremely smart. I hope everyone was a little bit more enlightened on a Tuesday than they usually are. I thought we could probably use it. It's been a fucking lame couple of weeks of dumb shit going on in Australian politics. So that was a lot of fun. Just going to get through some final comments in the chat before we go for the night. Hyperborean said maximum respect to Ross for his clarity and honesty, even though I disagree with him about much. And look, I do disagree with Ross on some things too. But the thing is, like, unlike the general standard of public debate in our country, you can have a discussion with Ross and he makes sense, right? He actually can back everything up. I mean, look, I disagree with him on immigration and I disagree with him on China and Russia, but you can have a conversation with him about it. So, that's something that should be valued. I would love to get one of the more, like, the less brain-rotted left-wingers on the show. I actually think it'd be fun to have purple pingers on the show, because I think despite, where he is on the political spectrum, I think he's one of the few people you can actually have a conversation with. This is a really interesting question about the Iraqi Muslim vigilantes in Melbourne. I actually heard this a couple of weeks ago. I heard this a couple of weeks ago from someone who said that there was some kind of ethno-religious connection. Look, it's an absolute disgrace. I mean, if it turned out, imagine what would happen if it turned out that it was being done by white supremacists. Imagine the public outcry. it's becoming harder and harder. And this is one of the reasons why I asked Ross that question about, whether it's incompetence or malfeasance. It is really becoming harder to believe some of this stuff is incompetence when it just keeps happening. That horrible, shocking crime in Western Sydney today, where an individual killed his wife and 2 disabled children, was running on air for 8-9 hours today before someone finally said his name, which I understand from having spoken to people in the media today. His name was included in the initial press release. His name was said in the press conference, and they chose not to run it. And why did they choose not to run it? Well, look up what his name was. So, yeah, I am increasingly of the view that there is malfeasance, not just incompetence. Purple Pingers or Marine. Funnily enough, I don't know Noah, but I did work with Marine in the upper house many years ago. I always actually got along with her pretty well. We should ask her. Let's see if she comes on. I think she might have changed a bit since then. What else we got, guys? Not much else going on with us at the moment at SOC HQ. I have made some inroads into getting this thing up on Spotify recently. Just going through the last few episodes, we've been quite good lately. I've noticed we've been not particularly offensive. Ever since Brian came up with Star Wars, people, we haven't said a single slur. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I redid the season tonight when I think Nathan suggested it to me. Was because, I feel like we've really kind of grown into the show's format a bit and the kind of stuff we want to put out there. And maybe now, we can tone it down, but just be a little bit more cautious in what we say and maybe find a wider audience, which could be fun. Speaking of wider audiences, Steve Bennett wants to know, are there any hot greens John could chat up? No, but if you could find me one, that'd be great. We've got another request in for Lydia Thorpe. Look, I would like to find a left winger to come on the show and talk to us. I always have fun with those guys. I like going in their spaces and stuff. Rara says, I bet Marine is pissed about the net gearing changes. She's my favorite property developer. And my favorite Pakistani chemical engineer who may or may not have worked on a nuclear program. Green Goblin has pointed out I wanted a new season because he cut his eyebrows. But look, I got to admit, I've been staring at myself on the screen for the last hour and a half. They're not as bad as I thought they were going to be. I thought they were like just straight lines, but they actually do look okay. And like they're still like they just don't have the kind of flick in them. I think it's going to grow back in, so I don't think it's a complete disaster. Yeah, I mean, of course, I should just ask Abby Chatfield to come on the show. Did you guys see what happened with Punters Politics about how he got ambushed by Carl? And he went on Carl's show, and Carl didn't realize he was bringing Senator McDonald on because he's too much of a millennial doofus to actually read his fucking emails. That was hilarious. Who's James Ison? And why does he say I've got bad optics? I have fantastic optics. Well, guys, that was the show for this Tuesday. Hope you all had fun with Ross. Thanks for tuning in. We will be back next Tuesday with Brian back, trying to convince the whole team to come on. And yeah, thank you for tuning in, and please stay conscious. See you next week.